Welcome, everybody, to the bottom of the hour here at High Noon News. I am Steve Avison, and you are looking also on the screen at my friend Jack Falvey. He's an adjunct professor at the Carroll School of Management at Boston College. He's also a frequent contributor to the Wall Street Journal, to Barron's, and regularly for the Manchester Union Leader all across New Hampshire. And that is where Jack is coming to us this afternoon. Jack, good to see you.
Good to be here.
It's great to have you. Thank you for taking some time on Good Friday in the midst of a chaotic time. It's Holy Week, it's Passover week as well. And of course, everyone is consumed with concern about coronavirus, recovering from it, etc. You've got great insight into all things in terms of the economy. And what folks at home, I want them to know is that you and I spoke about 18 and a half years ago. We've spoken several times, but in a similar circumstance. It was a crisis. It was following 9/11. People were uncertain whether or not the economy would recover, what kind of engagement will we have with this unseen enemy. And you had some wise words to share back then that in some ways I wonder if they are somewhat similar today, at the same time in some ways different. What are your thoughts?
I think we could run the tape just as it is and do away with this thing this morning. You've already got 4 great minutes all edited. I did play it for my class at Boston College when this thing first hit. And they were fascinated because they thought that we had made that recording a few days before. And of course, it was 18 years. And the message very simply was that this is the strongest economy on earth. And this is a glitch that we're going through. There's nothing wrong with the engine of the economy. It's been turned off or turned down, but there's no defects. Nothing is broken. Everything works. So if you can turn it off and nothing's broken, you should be able to turn it on and it should run again.
Of course, the big difference between then and now, the significant one, is that the enemy that we're struggling with now is one that we kind of can see. Yes. And it is coast to coast. And so when the job numbers came out this week, and they're quite comparable to ones last week, saying basically, double up the 6 million people filing for unemployment, and that's where we're at. How do we, recover that? It's not just as simple as turning back on the faucet.
Well, the funny thing is, it really is, because what we're looking at with numbers is we're looking in the rearview mirror. So we're seeing things as they were and as they're reported, and they're true and they're accurate. But a business professional very seldom looks at things as they were, but must project forward in order to operate their business as to how it's going to be. So in the corporate world, we have meetings on a regular basis that are projected out 18 months. And they get to be pretty good at figuring out where things are going. So the middle managers can tell you where it's going next week. And the prediction factor is always spot on. They very seldom miss these forecasts because this is what they do for a living. So all of us in the business world are focused forward. Yes, we look in the rearview mirror, we look at earnings, we look at stuff like that, but we can't influence anything that's in the rearview mirror. The only thing we can influence is going forward, and we're used to doing that. So from a business standpoint, I see zero barrier to moving forward and moving back to exactly where we were. The question is, how soon and when will it begin? And so we know it's coming. I mean, it's not hard to predict the future. I can guarantee you that we're not going to go into a 10-year recession, right? Mark my words, we're not going to go into a 5-year recession. We're not going to go into a 5-quarter recession. This thing is going to be over and done with by the 4th quarter at the very, very latest, and possibly more rapidly, because there's a tremendous amount of pressure in the economy to get back going again, to get back to work, to get our jobs back, to get our income back. So that pressure is not coming from the government. It's not coming from the Democrats or the Republicans. It's coming from the small business person. My hairstyle is a little bit more than what I would like right now.
So is mine.
But there's a barber who owns her own little shop, and it's a cash business. And she's not wealthy.
Well, so let me. I mean, I would hate to be the decider. Referring back to President Bush, he's ultimately the decider. That's where the responsibility lies.
Yeah.
When the Spanish flu occurred, 100 years ago, the greatest number of people to die were the people who died in the second wave.
Yes, correct.
Okay, in October, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you handle that urgency, that oh boy, that you talk about that, Barbara. I know 100 friends and family members who would like to get back out and put their small business back on its proper footing. What's the best way to do it?
Okay, you were good enough to correct my name on the little green box here. It's actually John James Falvey, and John James Falvey was my uncle, and he died in 1918 in October at Camp Drum, New York, and he died of influenza. Now, a tremendous number of studies have been done in the last 100 years, and there's no mystery as to what's going on. What is happening is that the second wave, which killed most of the casualties in 1918, they had no idea it was a second wave. They had no idea they were dealing with a virus. There was just very, very little information. And as it turns out, the virus in 1918 was entirely different than what we're dealing with today. This one, of course, is highly contagious. I don't know what the numbers are or 1918, but it is just as well documented. The problem is they have no idea how to deal with the second wave. We know exactly how to deal with the second wave. Frucci and stands up there. These people spent their whole life studying that 1918 thing. They can recite it. Jeremy Brown, who is an MD, who wrote a brand new book called Influenza, published last October. Because of my interest through the family and so on, I read the thing, got to talking with him and so on. And this is all very predictable. What they don't know is they don't know the characteristics of the individual virus.
So what would you do though as a business guy? I mean, since we're those guys, you start talking about my brain hazes over. I'm not going to read the book, I know, but I am curious, about the challenge facing the decider in chief about when to open things back up. Okay. So given your knowledge and your awareness back to the influenza and business in general, what's the value and the risk of opening things up, say May 1st?
Okay. First of all, I don't think it's going to work that way. I don't think there's going to be a decision made. There may be some decisions made at the state level because of the quarantine rules and so on. But what's going to happen is that it's slowly going to open on its own because there's going to be a head pressure built up that things have to be done. And people are getting squirrely already. And so they're holding back in the interest of the public. But it's begun, right? Well, first of all, parts of it never shut down. Yep. Shut down. They shut the churches down, but they didn't shut the liquor stores down.
Well, no, wait a second. Let's stop right there. You're saying it's going to happen in a graduated way. That's good enough for now. You've pivoted to something that I want to reference right now, which is the Easter lily right over your shoulder there. What do you think about the fact that they didn't close the liquor stores, but they did close the churches? And talk about your opinions about social gatherings and church and Easter and Passover and everything like that.
Interesting enough, people have tried to close churches and liquor stores at the same time, and that creates revolution. And, was brought down. Again, you have to think in terms of what's being controlled. And so the social gatherings, I can go through church the same way I go through the supermarket and liquor store if I want to, but I'm not allowed to. So that's a judgment call. Churches have never been packed to the walls. There's plenty of room in there for social distancing. And in fact, the Catholic Church practiced social discipline and distancing, for thousands of years, and they tried to break that social distancing thing with Vatican II and said, shake hands at Mass, and people left the church and became atheists. So there's a good record that we'll all get together. Also, just the word church. church is from the Greek, and it has nothing to do with buildings or institutions. Church is a gathering of people. It's not mass. It's not a sermon. It's not scripture. Church from the Greek is a gathering of people. And so I'm not watching mass on television on Easter. I'll do some praying. I don't damn well I will. I do a lot of reading, a lot of scripture and so on. But the gathering of people is what we're missing, and that's what's going to come back.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thank you for giving us your insight. I really do appreciate it, and best of the Easter weekend to you this weekend.
Sure. And notice this thing over here. I bought it on pure faith that something would blossom, and one has already come out with 5.
I love it. Thanks, Jack.